Nick Davis, welcome to the Bookshelf Conversations.
Thank you for having me, Ron. It's great to be here.
So this is like almost like a double header, let's say, because the video version was a four-part ESPN 30 for 30 program, which is longer than their usual uh, programs. And we're recording this on October 4th, and the book version officially comes out on October 5th. So there's a nice, it's a companion piece. But what idea came first? Did the idea for the book come first or the film?
Well, the film came first, but all along I knew there was no way we were going to be able to contain all the material that I wanted in the film. 4 hours is long for a film, but for a book, you have the chance to go deeper and include a lot of stories that we just didn't have time for in the film. And so, right from the beginning, I was telling ESPN and Major League Baseball, let's do a book, let's do a book. And thankfully they saw the wisdom in that too.
Interesting. You say, does Major League Baseball have to sign off on something like this?
Well, it's funny. I'm not. No, they don't. They have to agree to either get out of the way or block it or sign off. And what they agreed to do in this case was just get out of the way. They were a full partner in the film. They were one of the co-producers along with Jimmy Kimmel Company, Kimmelot, and a larger company, ITV, and my company, Nick Davis Productions, and Major League Baseball. All these sort of entities came together to make the film. But Major League Baseball, for a variety of I think, very interesting reasons that I couldn't begin to explain, decided not to participate in the book.
Because I always wonder when reading fiction, sometimes they will use the names of the actual teams, and sometimes they will. Uh, when I was fooling around yesterday, I came across a very short-lived baseball series called Clubhouse, which was based on a book published by someone who used to be a Yankee bat boy. So they couldn't use the Yankees, so they changed the name of the team to the New York Empires. So,
Right.
but I think that only lasted 4 episodes because traditionally baseball series, uh, episodic series, are not very well done and they don't last too long. I can't think of
No,
anything that
that's
lasted more than a season.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know if you remember Bay City Blues, Stephen
Sure.
Bochco's show in the 80s.
Mhm.
That was pretty good. I'd love to see that again. And interestingly enough, I've been, a lifelong Mets fan and been thinking about this team, basically nonstop since 1986. And I actually tried to get a series off the ground that was essentially based on 86 Mets, but I changed all the names and all that about, I don't know, 12 years ago.
See,
No, for whatever reason, baseball has a hard time translating.
something like that I can
Go ahead.
easily see, like I'm trying to think of that thing with Brockmeyer. Right, I can easily see
Yeah,
something like that on a streaming service or on cable. Fox had a series called Pitch a couple years back, which is about the first female player in the major leagues, and they're doing a second attempt to bring League of Their Own to television. I'm not sure if
right.
Apple TV is doing that or Amazon Prime, but that's also going to be on a non-traditional service because I know CBS did that not too long after the film came out, and that lasted like 3 or 4 episodes. So
Right,
when
right, right,
when
right.
you're compiling something like this, what are the steps involved? Do you have to set up who you make a list of, like, who you're going to talk to, uh, getting the archival footage? What's the scientific formula for putting together something like this?
Well, I don't know if it's a scientific formula or just a mass of just like, here's all the stuff. So, in the summer of 2018 is when I got serious about this, and started doing my lists of everybody we wanted to interview, put together all the players, the participants, people who were meaningful in New York City at that time, made a master list of people, and then Um, and then, yes, and then once we officially got going and made a partnership with Major League Baseball, then they give us the footage. Not give us, but we've made a deal to spend money, and they give us access to their library, and it was amazing. I mean, it was a very good deal. And then you just once we started, and we have researchers and co-producers and people to sort of delve into the material and start logging it and figuring out what we have. It's massive. For me, I did an outline of the series, and I broke it into chapters. Just coincidentally, it came out to 18 chapters, which I thought, oh, that's kind of neat. It's like 9 innings. And so when the book actually happened, I actually already had, hey, I've already outlined the thing. And we were able to take the transcripts of early rough cuts and sort of use that as the basis for certainly the first, I would say, 7 or so chapters. We hadn't even begun to edit the 4th episode by the time when the book was really deep into the production. So for that one, it was much more of a like digging into all the transcripts, putting them into the kind of shape that we would have done normally in the making of the film, but we were doing just for the that point ahead of the film.
Just, I don't mean to spring this on you like this, but just roughly, how many people are involved in a production like this? Not counting the people you interviewed. I'm talking about the producers, the transcribers. Just because I don't think people really get a sense of how much is involved in something like this. Because they figure, well, you're just talking to a few talking heads and you're getting the archival footage, but somebody's got to put this together.
Yeah, I mean, I would hesitate. I don't know offhand. I mean, you look at the credits at the end, and they fly by because there are so many people. And I think in the back of the book, actually, there a lot of them are in the acknowledgments because I wanted to indicate like this is anything but a one-man job. Like, I had, most crucially, we had 3 incredible film editors who were working on the 4 episodes. The one guy did the 1st episode and the 4th episode, and 2 other editors did episodes 2 and 3. And then I had a sort of right arm who was like, producer with me from the minute we officially signed the contract. And then there were the partners, and Jimmy Kimmel and Cousin Sal and Nick Trotta of MLB, and associate producer, researchers, assistant editors, executives, a whole post-production team that was working. And because we were all working remotely, sometimes because of the pandemic, sometimes it wasn't even clear to me. And you'd have a meeting and you'd think, who's that person in the upper left? I've never seen them before. And it would turn out, well, that's actually a person who's been doing incredibly great work finding the shot of Bobby Ojeda looking really perturbed in the dugout the night before, or the night of Game 6 of World Series, the World Series. Like, we needed that shot, find that shot. That guy found that shot. How long it took him to find it, I don't know, but he worked really hard to find that shot. So, there was just a tremendous amount goes into it that you just don't see. And also, I think the other thing that's interesting now that the film is out there is people act like there were these decisions made, and it's all an accident. I mean, or so much of it is accidental. I mean, you prepare and you prepare and you prepare, but we didn't say, "Hey, Keith, make sure that your cat comes to the interview room." Keith's had his cat, so the cat jumps up, and we think, "Yeah, this is going to work. Let's do it." So it's not near as much by design. I think and for me, that's the fun. It's finding the accident, and that's why I wanted this book to be an oral history, because it's those guys' story. I mean, the last thing the world needs is me giving my pontifications about the '86 Mets. I wanted this to be them telling the story told by the people who were really there and lived it. Players, writers, whoever was there at the time.
All right, let's talk about the people who appear in the show. You do have a lot of the old Mets. Sadly, Gary Carter is no longer with us. Or was there anyone you wanted that you couldn't get, or they refused to appear? And I'll tell you who I'm thinking of, is conspicuous by his absence, is Jesse Orosco. I'm assuming he's still alive.
He is. I think had it not been for the pandemic, we would have gotten Jesse Orosco. He said no very early on. I think there was some hesitation on the parts of some of these guys, like, oh, not this again. It's all this negativity, and or it'll just be about Daryl and Doc, and didn't we just do this? And others expressed hesitation but went ahead with it. But Jesse said no early on, and I never circled back with him. And I think if I had circled back with him, he'd have heard from others and said, "Oh yeah, all right, I'll do it," because I see that what you guys are doing is not an expose, but is the complete epic story of this team and time and place. And so putting everything in context, which was really crucial to us in the film and in the book. So he said no early on, and because of the pandemic, it just meant that we were typically you shoot all your interviews and then you get in the edit room, and we were shooting as we were going. And so we looked up, we hadn't completed all our interviews, and we had submitted our first rough cut to ESPN for this 4-part documentary, 4 television hours, which is really 3 hours and 20 minutes, and it was 6 hours and 25 minutes. And at that point, we had to cut. So I wasn't then going back to Jesse Orosco and saying, look, we're 620, but I need to hear what it felt like. And if you ever saw your mitt came down, I would have loved to have done that. We just didn't have the resources at that point. And the other guy who said no that I regretted was George Foster.
I was wondering about him too.
People forget that George Foster was on the '86 Mets, and it ended so badly for him that I think he just first he said no. Then I did pursue him and got him on the phone and explained what we were doing, and he said, "Okay, I'll do it." And then the pandemic hit, and when I circled back, that shut us down for a couple of months. When I circled back with him a couple of months later, he said, I'm going to have to respectfully decline. So he was somebody who I really would have liked to have talked to. Not I would have liked to have talked to all of them. I would have loved to have talked to Doug Sisk. I would have loved to have talked to Danny Heap. I would have loved to have talked to Rafi Santana and Hojo and all of them. Randy Neiman. But we didn't have the resources.
And as far as the non-baseball people go, you have a very nice collection. You have Tomjanovich, you have Roger Angel, the dean of sports writers, who I imagine at the time he wasn't 100 yet, but he certainly celebrated his 100th birthday recently. One of the most interesting interviewees I thought was George R.R. Martin. I would never have thought of him as a baseball fan, and I wish there had been more of him in it.
A little bit more of him in the book than we do in the film. He was great, and he's a huge Mets fan. He says, the first line of his interview was, "My name is George R.R. Martin, and for my sins, I am a Mets fan." And I just thought he was a terrific guy to sort of, speak for, the Met fan of a certain vintage, and he's George R.R. Martin. His insights and thoughts are so interesting, and then he talks about when George R. R. Martin talks about crowds and what crowds can do, and if you're at all familiar with Game of Thrones and what crowds can do, that it carries a lot of weight. And so hearing him talk about both the misery of the crowd during the beginning of the 10th inning of Game 6 of the World Series, and then the jubilation and the love that strangers have for each other after the miracle happens, that was pretty great.
Was there anyone in that area, non-baseball people, you really sought out who didn't want to, or because another person I would have thought would have made a great interview was Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes, it would have been super fun to talk to Jerry Seinfeld. At the time that we approached him, and this was one of the great benefits of having as the executive producer of the program, Jimmy Kimmel. It's not just me asking Jerry Seinfeld, it's Jimmy Kimmel, or with the the imprimatur of Jimmy Kimmel. No, Jerry was very kind, but had to decline for reasons of just sheer busyness. So we didn't get him. But I felt like as a result, it opened up a comedy slot for Bill Burr. And we did speak to Bill Burr for the film, and he's a huge Red Sox fan, and it was fun to speak to him about it all too.
One of the parts I thought was very interesting was the inclusion of Calvin Schiraldi, who pitched both for the Mets and the Red Sox. So he saw it from both points of view. So because he, I think, always got this like they talk about, he looked like a deer in headlights. He didn't have what it took. Words that I will not use in this interview. So I thought it was interesting to get his point of view on it.
Yeah, I think that, and one of the things because in the book we're able to go into his story in more detail than we had time for. When the Mets in the 80s, they were bringing up one great pitcher after another, and it's Darling and Gooden, and they get Fernandez from the Dodgers, Sid Fernandez, and Rick Aguilera, and then this next great guy who pitched alongside Roger Clemens at Texas, Calvin Schiraldi. And so when he came to the Mets in 84, 85, it was like, he's going to be the next guy. And there was a tremendous amount of excitement around him that fizzled kind of quickly, and most sort of dramatically in this game against the Phillies in June of 85, where they brought in Schiraldi in relief, and he just got clobbered in a game that the Mets lost 26-7. And a lot of Mets afterwards pointed at that game and said, we didn't like his body language on the mound. It was clear he was giving up. He was soft. He was all these other things that we can't say on on this podcast. And so he was kind of run out of town by the team itself. I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I don't think any of the Mets were that sorry to see him go. They didn't feel he had that eye of the tiger and that feeling like we're going to dominate. You didn't get that from Calvin Schiraldi. He was a little bit more laid back and sort of the laconic Texan as opposed to the aggressive Texan style. And so it was terrific that then he shows up as the ace of the Red Sox staff. It was him and Bob Stanley in the bullpen, and he saved, I think, 11 games down the stretch in August and September for the Red Sox in '86. And it was fantastic that he agreed to be interviewed. He is now a very successful baseball coach in Texas and uses what happened to him in the postseason in '86, where he pitched very well against the Angels, pitched very well in Game 1 against the Mets. I think maybe got another save, maybe not, but he pitched well up until Game 6. And then did not pitch well. But he uses his failures in those games and what his mindset was as a way to help his players, his students. And he was similarly open with us, because I think he feels like he didn't have the right mindset, and he's happy to share that with people. And documentary is like, it's a great gift, and I'm enormously grateful to Calvin Schiraldi for sitting with us and being so open and honest about where he was, and his attitude toward the Mets, who have made such a big to-do about how he was too soft, or they saw fear in his eyes and all this stuff. To him, that's a crock.
Talking with Schiraldi and his openness, I wonder, do you have to vet the veracity of these things they say? Because, and again, I'm thinking of Lenny Dykstra and all the stuff that came out of his mouth, which would give this like I'm surprised ESPN didn't give this like one of those MA, a warning about language.
I think they did, actually. I think they said mature language,
Okay.
And then and on ESPN2 it was bleeped. So if you want the censored version, you can watch it on ESPN2, and families or people of a certain demeanor would just say, I don't want to hear any of that. I'll watch on ESPN2.
It's interesting because the book has it all of his
Yes. Yes. Although even there, the Disney lawyers, or Hyperion, they made us take out quite a lot. I mean, the
Really?
first 5 or 7 minutes of Lenny Dykstra's interview were just off the charts, profane and hilarious, and I felt like I was in the presence of a kind of Lenny Bruce. I mean, he was so just the unbelievable stream and hilarious, but we couldn't use any of it in the book or the film. But it's funny, getting back to the veracity thing. Memory is a funny thing,
Mhm.
and so there are, and I think we include a few things in the book that are, people would say, well, and I can't believe I remember this, but then Tommy Herr hit a bullet up the middle. Keith Hernandez says this about a game in St. Louis in '86, and I don't know why I remember this so well, but Tommy Herr hit into a game in double play. And you go to Baseball Reference, and it's not Tommy Herr. So it was Terry Pendleton. So, in the film, you can't do that. You can't have somebody say that and then see that it's not Tommy Herr. In the book, you can, and, we make a little comment like, Keith is not always the most reliable narrator. Some of these guys, their memory, Kevin Mitchell tells this terrific story about being taken out at night in Montreal, and the guys got him drunk, and it was a nightmare, and he had to go play the next day. And sure enough, the next day he gets 3 hits off Floyd Yeomans. Well, if he had gotten 3 hits off Floyd Yeomans, that would have been a great sequence in the film, but he didn't. So we couldn't use that in the film, but it's a great story, and so I'm pretty sure it's in the book. So yeah, there's tall tales about this team, and we have their famous plane ride from Houston, and they ripped up the bill. Davy Johnson ripped up the bill from the airlines of how because he just felt like, we're going to win this World Series, and we're not going to make you guys pay for this, and hearing that number of how much that bill was for, 5,000, 7,000, 10,000, 18,000. Daryl said it was $100,000. And that's part of the fun of this particular team is they are sort of a Paul Bunyan like, it's why it's called Once Upon a Time in Queens. It's a fairy tale. It's a somewhat profane and cracked tale, but it's a larger than life story about a larger than life team. In a time and place where living that kind of large life was vaunted. It was an
Now, talk a little bit about the times, because a lot of the documentary is about what was going on in New York and the country at the time. There's racism. There's the '80s greed is good philosophy. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the more we got into this story of the '86 Mets, the more naturally it just seemed obvious that they were a perfect reflection of that time and place. And the fact that the team and the city had both been in the toilet in the late '70s, the bankruptcy, Ford to City drop dead, the Bronx is burning, all of that coincided with the nadir of the Mets franchise. And then the city came roaring back in the '80s. No regulations, and Ed Koch and Reagan and what they sort of did to pump up the city. Not that there weren't a lot of problems still in New York, and they were being to a large extent swept on, especially by the sort of mainstream media. But there was a spirit on the surface of go-go excitement and money and nightclubs and all of that stuff, which the Mets embraced and embodied. And a number of our interviewees, players and commentators, just said that the Mets blended into the city. They were New York at that time. And it's very rare for a sports team to do that. You don't ordinarily associate the great sports teams with their time and place. You don't think of 1972 Miami Dolphins and just get a picture of Miami in the early '70s. I mean, you sort of do, the Orange Bowl and whatever. But the Mets of that time just reflected where they were in a really unusual and fascinating way. And that's what the film and the book became about to a large extent, quite organically.
I want to backtrack just a little bit when we're talking about veracity. Two of the Met players who come across as very honest and open are Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden, both of which were, I don't want to say victims of that New York scene. I mean, Keith talks about it. Ron Darling talks about how, hey, we were the Mets and everybody loved us and everybody wanted to buy us drinks and give us cocaine and all. But Darryl and Dwight seem to have the biggest story about how substance abuse ruined their careers.
Yeah, I think that they both are at a point in their lives where, well, like Schiraldi, they want to help people. You know, they don't want people making the same mistakes they made, and they both had very challenging, backgrounds, to say the least. And what's interesting is at the time we knew this about Darryl. I mean, Darryl Strawberry, every Met fan knew, everybody knew he came from a broken home, and his emotions were on his sleeve, and he was, sniping with the press and sometimes with teammates and umpires, and could also be incredibly sunny and gregarious and lovely and charismatic, but clearly was haunted. And we all knew this. And he would slump, and but but Dwight Gooden was different, especially in '84, '85. And we were all told he came from a solid middle class background. He dealt beautifully with the press. He seemed to have it all. And so his, testing positive for cocaine in spring training of '87, and to some extent, some of what had gone on in '86, he still had a terrific year by anybody else's standards, but it was not the stratosphere that '85 had been. I think it caught everybody by surprise. And even then, I still don't think we knew about the trauma that went on in his childhood. And I didn't know. I mean, his mother shot his father. They stayed together. The father lived, but that's not something that happens in most homes. And how do you deal with that? And he's 19, 20 years old in the major leagues, pitching at the highest level, and he, as he says in the film, in the book, if you don't deal with stuff like that, it's going to come back and get you in some way. And whether that means you're going to, just seek alcohol and drugs because you can't deal with it, or you want to numb yourself, he doesn't know, and I don't know, but all that is there. And I think both of these guys speak so openly about their life and struggles that it can be, kind of inspiring to read their words and feel like, wow, it's raw and it's honest.
As a filmmaker, I'm thinking of you as like a parent, and you don't have any favorites. But was there like a favorite part of the story that particularly stands out for you?
Well, that's exactly right. I do feel like a parent, and I feel like I love all these interviewees the same in different ways. I felt, I guess, as a filmmaker, I was enormously thrilled with Laney Dykstra's interview because it was so deep and intense. And I was thrilled with Daryl's because it was so, I mean, the ones we've talked about, also Kevin Mitchell, and Ray Knight, and Bobby Ojeda and Keith Hernandez. I mean, I think all of these guys gave so much of themselves and so much time. And Bobby Ojeda called me after the first one, and he was like, I don't think I quite nailed it. And I said, well, you want to come back? He was like, can I do that? I said, yeah, of course. So we did him a second time. I mean, they all felt, I think, once they got into it, there was some hesitation on the parts of some of them. And I think Ojeda was one of them. And I think that's why he wanted to do it a second time. I think he felt like only partway through the first interview did he realize, hey, wait a minute, we're really doing this. Like, I'm not just, this is not just soundbite central for, a post-game show. I'm really being asked to reflect on that time and what it meant and what it means to me now and what the city meant. And And so that's why he wanted to come back. I think he had a sort of awakening middle of the interview. But I just felt like almost without exception, I was enormously grateful to all of them for granting us so much of their time and their memories and thoughts. And Keith, I mean, I didn't ask Keith about his dad. I didn't say, what movie did your relationship with your father make you think of? He just started talking about his dad and then said, this movie, Fear Strikes Out. I mean, it always struck me as a lot like me and my dad. So you go look at Fear Strikes Out, and I mean, the man is driven crazy by his father. So it's just like, okay, that's fascinating. And so, getting the chance to really go deep on these guys' stories was really a privilege.
Fair enough. We've been talking with Nick Adams, the filmmaker responsible for Once Upon a Time in Queens, and Oral
As
History
much
of
as
the
I
Night.
love Hemingway, I do have to correct you. It's Nick Davis.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And
That's
unfortunately,
fine.
unlike you, I don't have the wherewithal to edit. So my deep apologies, and thank you for correcting me.
No, no
Uh,
problem.
Once Upon a Time in Queens, an oral history of the 1986 Mets. The book comes out tomorrow, but you have a copy of it there if you would like to show our audience.
It. And I have to say, I'm very proud of the book, of the contents, but it's a beautiful,
It is.
lavishly illustrated volume, and they did an incredible job with it. I thought it was going to be kind of a, I don't know what the word is, but like a quickie.
Uh,
And they really put it together in such a solid way. It's a very handsome item.
and the holidays are coming up soon. Makes a great gift. I know what you mean about quickies because invariably after a team wins the World Series, the local paper will come out with usually a paperback version where they just cram in all the stuff from their archives to try to make some money. Well, Nick, thank you very much. Continued success. Do you have another project coming up soon that we should know about?
Well, funnily enough, I do have another book out, Ron, that came out the same day, and it's a book I've been working on for 19 years about my grandfather, Herman Mankiewicz, who wrote Mank. Who wrote Citizen Kane. It was the subject of the movie Mank, and his brother Joe Mankiewicz, the filmmaker behind such films as All About Eve. And I wrote a book called Competing with Idiots: Herman and Joe Mankiewicz, a dual portrait. And I'm just looking around to see if I have. I have a galley. Hold on one second. This right here is the book, Competing with Idiots, and so that is it's just a crazy thing to have finished these two projects at the exact same time. One, a labor of love that I've been thinking about since 1986, and one, a labor of love that I've been thinking about even longer
Well,
since I've been Herman Mankiewicz's grandson for over 5 decades.
and as a film buff, I'm sure I'll be picking up a copy of that too. Nick, thank you so much. Take care. Be safe.
Thanks so much, Ron. Take care.